Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the Products by Women event. We just waited a few minutes to make sure everybody was coming in. So now we'll go ahead and start. But it's so nice to have everyone here today, especially since it's a Friday. So happy Friday to everybody, and thank you for joining us. So for today's Products by Women event, I'm Rosa. I'll be your moderator for today's event. I'll introduce the topic, introduce myself, and then we'll go right into the presentation. And for those who are new to the Products by Women community, welcome to the community and thank you for joining us today. This community is a network for women in innovation, tech, and beyond. And it's basically just a space for all of you to be able to connect to peers, find jobs, get matched with recruiters, and be able to accelerate your career from building upon this really amazing network. And some ways that you can connect with Products by Women, there are many ways you can connect with the community. You can attend events like these that we'll be having virtually. You can read articles that are on the Women in Product, that are written by Women in Product, that are on the website. You can join the Slack channel as well, that's very active, and communicate with other women in product. And you can also listen to our podcast. So those are a few ways that you can get connected to the community, meet other women, and just create really amazing relationships from there. And I'll be your moderator. My name is Rosa. I'm a first-time moderator, so definitely really excited to be here with all of you today and to be with Products by Women. I'm a software engineer at American Express. I've been there since 2018, so I'm hitting upon 2 years now. And a little fun fact, or a few fun facts about myself. I love cooking, I love music, and I'm a fanatic of The Office. So if anybody loves The Office, definitely hit me up. And today I'd love to introduce our speaker for today, which is Vaishnavi. And her topic of the day is what's in a brand. Vaishnavi has completed her MBA from Ivey Business School in Canada. She's a member of the editorial board for their InTouch Business Magazine, and having interned at Goldman Sachs and worked at Google right after her business undergrad, she has experience not just with top brands, but with leaving them for different and arguably riskier pastures, such as her current startup, which is Top Hat, where she's a product manager of growth. And her journey into going into product management, she gets the question, why did you leave Google? And she believes that everyone has their own path to follow, and there's no predetermined set path or way to a career. And she'll be speaking upon her personal journey a lot during this talk today. So it'll be a really amazing opportunity to just learn more about her personal career and her thoughts, and she'll be giving really amazing advice. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to Vaishnavi.
I'm going to turn my video on as well. Thank you, Rosa. Thanks for that lovely introduction. I'm going to go back into my presentation. So as Rosa mentioned, I'm Vasihnavi Ravi, and I've had quite an interesting path in a career, I would say. And I'd love to kind of share a bit of it and take you through the journey and learnings that I've had along the way. And hopefully give some kind of an insight as to how your own careers and paths can go from there. And the best way to start for it is kind of taking you through my journey itself. So my journey started really, my career, I would say, started when I completed my undergrad in business with a focus in marketing. Right out of there, I actually joined Goldman Sachs as in an internship position before I graduated for a winter. And this actually brings me to an interesting point of where I think your career or your journey is as much about knowing what you want and knowing what fits for you versus not knowing that or understanding that something is not actually a good fit for you, actually. And so that was a bit about that for Goldman Sachs for me, where I kind of knew I didn't really want to do spend my career in banking. And so right out of graduation, I joined Google and I worked in the advertising sector for nearly 3 years there. And again, starting out, I really started with established incumbents who are bigger companies, and we'll dig a little deeper into what that meant for me early on in my career versus now, and kind of looking back how that looked like. Post Google, I actually moved into completing my master's in business over my undergrad that I completed, also in business. And I moved to Ivey, which is a leading business school here in Canada. It was a one-year program, a really rigorous program, and it really helped me develop my toolkit to kind of step into the role of more product-oriented roles that I got into after that, and that will be of like super interest for a lot of people here, I'm sure. I did transition into more established companies as well within Canada, but also growing startups within Canada, in dealing with different industries, ranging from payments to telecom to advertising as well, given my past. And now I'm actually with a growing tech educator called Top Hat, where we're disrupting really the field in education and tech, which is, especially in this COVID world, really taking on a new meaning in terms of making an impact as a product manager. And so that's kind of the journey I've been through and where I am right now. And given that, I kind of wanted to put this back on some users to understand and see what you think of now that you've seen this journey. Does this surprise you? And feel free to respond in the chat if you feel like it's surprising, or no, actually this was something typical and you're not too surprised by it. And that'll be interesting to see. And I'm gonna actually also depend on Rosa to let me know, like, be my timer.
Yes. I can make a timer for maybe like 3 minutes?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
There's some people who say typical. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry. Let me know if you guys can hear me now. I see there's someone saying neither. Oh, thank you. It's inspiring. It's quite the mix, isn't it? Michaela, who knows a little bit about me from before this. Yeah, the shift between India to Toronto, I'm looking at Namisha's chat. I'm going to talk a bit more about it, but it was a big shift, exactly. Oh, I like that, interesting. Yeah. So actually I'm seeing a little bit across the board, but more of like, you aren't surprised, which is more typical, which is really interesting as we go through this, because I'm going to go back to my journey a bit here. Because you're right, there is a variety there, but you can see a lot more as we go through the modern years of career development for everybody. There's a lot more of kind of searching and exploring and taking those bolder moves, which I love seeing across the board. And it's not something where, and this was about 10 years ago, where users or colleagues were always wondering, what's in your mind and why would you want to move? Like the obvious default was to stay somewhere where you've always been. And so actually with that was actually really great information from my listeners as well, because I did get asked, especially at that time, and lesser now for sure, but why did I leave Google? Was it the fame and money of, getting at the ground floor of a startup where we can grow it from scratch? Was it passion for what I wanted to do? Was it self-sabotage? There's no stone left unturned, so there could be a lot of things going through there. And to answer this, I think the first step I wanted to take was show you a bit of a landscape of how my experience was at Google. I worked throughout a lot of different offices, actually across the country. You'd see Toronto, New York, and the huge campus they have at Mountain View as well, and one in Dubai here where I worked, went for a brief visit actually. But interestingly, it was, or almost ironically, I would say, it was a bit of an insular experience for me. And what I mean by that is, with Google, I kind of lived with my colleagues. We were roommates, and actually one of my best friends pictured here is from Google as well. So we lived together and worked together. I dated a Googler who's now my husband, then my boyfriend. And so, there were these activities post work that kind of kept you there. There were games, there was food, there was everything there that kind of made it more of an insular environment as well. And so it was almost like a campus outside a campus. And mind you, this was my first job out of college. So the transition, I guess, wasn't too huge for my college campus. But at the same time, it was an environment where you're cushioned in from a lot of things, and as you take your first steps, you're kind of going through this path that has been really well thought out for you, which was really great. I also had that experience of, being fully immersed in working there. It was, of course, something where even my grandpa knew what brand I was working with. He's seen Google search, and even though I was not working directly with Google search, he was familiar with it. And so it definitely came with that recognition from outside. And all of these elements I'm going to talk a bit more about, and which is why I kind of want to give you an understanding of how my experience and my life there was over the 3 years. And so even though the culture, I was surrounded by super smart peers and mentors, I actually met one of my best mentors there, and I'm still in touch with them. And the benefits, like we talked about, and the brand recognition was there. Google itself, ironically, the experience itself made me kind of think through and introspect about my next steps as my career grew. I worked across different departments there, but one thing that was very common to all Googlers was this understanding or notion about being uncomfortably excited. It was a phrase that was often cited in Google, especially when I was there. It was coined during that time. And I really believed in it. I guess I took it to heart a lot as well. Because that was something that asks you, are you pushing your boundaries? Are you doing everything you can to learn and grow from your experiences? And so when you looked back at my life at Google, having that insular whole life experience within the Google ecodome itself, it was something that I started to ask myself a bit more often, like what was my passion and what was my motivation in my career? What did I really want to achieve? And again, I don't think these are questions that you can just answer once and be done with. These are questions, for me, I always ask myself again and again to make sure that I'm being true to myself, and also to really feel like I'm working somewhere or doing something where I'm having impact, which was another huge piece of it, where with established companies, not just with Google, but established companies like Facebook and Amazon even, it is a bigger machine. And just by virtue of that, you have a more of an experience of being a cog in the wheel, where it's not just as simple as to get up and go to a dev or go to an operations specialist and ask them a question and get an answer. There are more processes in place because of that. And while we can learn a lot from those processes that was established, and I definitely took a lot away from those, it was something where it was harder to make an impact in the way that I wanted to do. And learn and grow from that impact and actually have that feeling of accomplishment of having made a change that really impacts the organization that I work with, and in effect externally as well. And finally, one of the points here was we talked about the benefits, which is amazing. And I think I coined this term, but I'm sure it's out there as well. But I started seeing it as some sort of a golden cage. It had everything that you needed to be there, but that also meant that I spent all my free time at work. And started doing work which was not as efficient sometimes, and work that, again, was not fully connecting with my inner why and meaning all the time. And the benefits were kind of caging that in for me in an insular environment. And so while the benefits are amazing and they're really, something that I enjoyed, I wouldn't lie, and I want to be completely honest, it is something that that you get over after a while. For me, the shine of it actually in the first year or so, it kind of, you get used to it. And a bit of it was also starting to take it for granted. And I think that's where I started to feel a little uncomfortable in a different way, where I said, I don't want to kind of sink into these luxuries and sink into it and not be proactively, engaging myself and making myself useful to wherever I am. So that was a big portion of kind of driving my questions. And so during this time, I was in my third year, and the mentor that I talked about, we were working through what would be a good transition for me if I did need to do something more, and when I decide to do something more. This was, a year before I moved. And so one thing that I also want to be very candid about, it's not something that it looked like I upped and left, right? If you look at my journey as well, and that's definitely not how it happened. It was something that was kind of slowly, some thoughts that I wanted to think about and reflect about, and also work with my mentor to understand what I really wanted to get out of it. Is it that I had to leave Google to make something of myself that I was satisfied with, or what does that look like? And during this time, I came across one of the execs at Google who was based out of Canada, but he was traveling across the offices with his job, and he was an Ivey alumni. And we had a great conversation about his MBA, which at that time he was 20 years out, having graduated from Ivey. And what struck me the most was how connected he was with his peers and with his the fellow students that he took his MBA with, and what a tight network that was. And that was something that was pretty interesting to me. I knew that I wanted to go down the business path. And I enjoyed my undergrad in business. And I also knew that I wanted to take that forward in a way where I could actually make an impact. And so at that point, and this is, again, a few years ago, dating myself, but at that point, product as a general institution was kind of in the very beginnings of being established, understanding that product has its own role in a company in leading what the service or the actual value that the company was providing to clients and users alike. And so I was introduced to that in that way, and I was starting to think about, okay, what tools do I need to actually make me successful in that next step if I want to take when I do take a step in that direction. Having thought through all that, though, there was a lot of consideration with the decision, like I mentioned, and but at the end of the day, I knew that I wanted to live what I believed in, and ironically, being uncomfortably excited and pushing my boundaries and learning. But this involved a lot of things. Namisha, like you said, when I thought about Ivy, it was about moving countries. I was not just moving away from my family, but I was moving away from my then boyfriend, putting us in a long distance, and moving away from a life that I knew that I definitely didn't hate, and I had a lot of respect for. And so that was a huge decision and a lot of factors that went into that. As well as the feeling of, having made the decision myself. The amazing thing about that was everyone around me were really supportive. My family, my friends, my boyfriend as well. And the truth was, I was actually, in complete honesty, I was going out of a good job into debt. That I was taking to do an MBA and really putting my risk out there. But everyone around me believed in my decision to do that, which looking back was so much more important than I could have imagined at that point. And so taking those elements involved in making that size of a decision it was a team effort, I would say. But it was always behind a singular goal that I wanted to, and a post that isn't a finite post, but I wanted to kind of fulfill for myself and look out at what opportunities I have and not kind of close those on for myself. And so that kind of led me to that whole journey of moving continents and going through my MBA, and really taking that time to away from a job and work to learn more about product, which was amazing because right now where I've landed, it's a sum of all my experiences. I would say it's a sum of all of the companies that I've been in, the big, the small, the medium, and it's a sum of all of the types of industries that I've seen. Because what I really wanted to do was be passionate about what I work in, and right now I work in education, and I couldn't be more happy about being within the product and making an impact in that product that actually has a impact on millions of students and teachers around the world. As well as knowing that it's not, my fulfillment is not attached to just one factor. It's not just the brand of the company. It's not just the industry that I'm in, or it's not just the function that I work in. It is a combination of all. And I'm glad that I've reached the point, and I think I'll definitely continue to be moving in this path. But this is not something that everybody just understands right away as soon as they graduate, for example, and know like, yeah, this is exactly where I want to be. I think it is a journey, and taking that risk to push your boundaries and learn and grow is always about having that gumption to do it, to take that step forward. And so the real understanding that I got from looking back at my own career and what I see from people asking me questions about it and looking at their own is that there was really no predetermined or a set way to launch your career or even to establish your career later. Really, the thing is you need to feel comfortable with what you're, or uncomfortably comfortable with where you are, and making sure that you're always pushing that, pushing the boundaries of your comfort zone a little bit, always making sure you're learning and growing and moving forward at a pace that actually works for you. I think that's an important piece. I haven't mentioned that in the slide, but I think it's so easy for us to compare ourselves with those around us and seeing where they are. I'm guilty of it in the past, and it's so easy to say, oh, I'm at this age and they're at this age, but they've done this and I've done this. It is not linear, and it's really not. There for a reason, there is no one definition of success. And so I think it's kind of those building blocks, and what I'm really grateful for are each of those building blocks taught me what I preferred and what I didn't, and where I wanted to kind of take my career for myself. And so that's really kind of the journey that I've been through. And I covered a lot of like the thought process, but I'm like I'd love to hear from you guys as well, and maybe answer a few questions. I'll turn it back to Rosa to help moderate for it.
Thank you so much, Vaishnavi, for giving such a good presentation. And personally, I was really able to connect with the things that you were saying, especially since, in my career right now, I'm definitely contemplating moving industries. I am currently in engineering, and I am thinking about transitioning into product. Especially, that was a big reason why I wanted to get involved with Products by Women. So even like when like me and Vaishnavi were just like working together on this presentation, and we were kind of like running through her slides, I remember really connecting to the things that you were saying, kind of like the journey that you went on. So thank you so much for sharing such like big part of your life, and for really giving, I think, some really meaningful advice. So thank you so much. I'd love to jump into some questions. Yeah. I'd love to jump into some questions. I know Nanisha said in the chat, if you have any questions, to drop them in the chat. So we'll also be taking questions from the chat as well for anyone who does want to ask a question. So just to start off, I'd love to kind of like touch on the point that you kind of made towards the end, that like through all of your different experiences, that's kind of like led you to where you are today. And through the journey of your career, kind of like going through your timeline, you did have the opportunity to work at a lot of different companies over the last few years. So kind of like how you said, like you got the opportunity to intern at Goldman, work at Google, leave, do your MBA, work at a few other companies. And I'd love to just learn a little bit more about how you felt kind of like changing companies pretty regularly and how you thought that that kind of like boosted your career. And I feel like this is definitely something that I see a lot more with our generation versus like older generations, where there's kind of like the tendency from older generations to like stay in one company and like kind of just like settle there, versus like I feel like people in our generation more regularly like changing companies every few years. So I love to kind of get your perspective on that, and how was that kind of like changing companies pretty regularly, and how did that help your career?
Yeah, that's a great question. The one thing that my mentor told me very early on in my career was, once you're in a role, in a new role that you've taken up and you're ramped up, see how it goes for over 2 years. And usually advisors or mentors, you wouldn't find like a timeline out there, but this is kind of what he told me and he believed. And at the end of 2 years, see if you're still learning and growing in that place. If you're learning and growing, that's great, and it might even mean that the company has been, changing in itself and growing as well. And if not, then it's not do or die, but see what you can kind of add to your role or maybe change within your control that helps you kind of expand your horizons and expand your knowledge. And that kind of stuck with me a bit in terms of how I saw my own career as well. But as well, I think a lot of times our generation, to your point, like you said, our generation has a bit more of a tendency to move quickly between companies. And I do feel like sometimes we get a bit of flack for that as well, in different ways. And for me, what I feel is the way the industry work has changed from how it was in the previous generation, where things that used to take 10 years to happen take 2 years to happen right now. And especially catalysts like COVID, and it really accelerates the amount of innovation and the amount of, ideas that are out there and that are being worked on and implemented. And so I think as a generation, we're kind of facing a different pace of life as well, where you get to kind of go through those rungs in your own different pace from what the generation before was. And the one thing that I want to say is like, and a couple of those, a summary of the couple of those was what led me to a couple of those transitions. Not all the transitions were really the same reasons. I think they're very personal. For example, my transition from a startup called Addictive to a larger company called the Weather Network was just the acquisition of the company after a year of being there. And that in itself provided a new learning and growth for me, where, I was there for a few more years because there was so much more that I was able to give to the company and get as well. And it's always a two-way street. And again, I wouldn't say that that's exactly how you're supposed to be doing it for everybody out there, and that's kind of the main point of my last slide. Like, do consider what's best for yourself when you're making the move, and but don't afraid to be bold, is what I'd say.
Awesome. So we have, thank you so much, Vaishnavi. We have a lot of good questions coming through. So I'd love to shoot another question. So awesome. So one question that I see that was asked pretty frequently was, how do you see product as a function evolving in the future? And if you could speak a little bit towards like what your typical day looks like at Top Hat.
Yeah, sure. With product, like I said, one of the things that really attracted me to it was the fact that you're making an impact within a function within the company that is very vital to the company. And that's exactly how I've found it to be in my experience. For me, in my experience, and again, product, I think it's still evolving a bit, but it really takes on a role of what the company's needs are at that time and what kind of product the company has, whether it's physical or digital, or even if it's some kind of a service that's not really tangible. That's still some utility or value that you're providing to the users. And for us, it's a digital service, and so what that entails for me is triaging a lot between the developer teams that we have who are doing great work and are kind of working through implementation and improvements for the product, and the business on the other end. And when I say business, it can mean a variety of things. In my previous company, it used to mean a lot of talking to sales and a lot of talking to our other product teams that we were there too. And in this environment, it means talking to my marketing teams, my operations teams, and understanding and getting a pulse of the user from my support and sales teams. For me, that's the most valuable thing, and I try to do that as often as possible. Right now, I've actually had to say that I do it less than I would like to at this moment, because this is kind of our peak moment in education seasonality. We're kind of coming towards a lot of launches, but generally I try to do every 2 weeks, I try to touch base with the pulse of the company's users through listening to customer calls, talking to sales, and understanding feedback for my product. Me especially, I'm working with growth, so my everyday really looks like making sure that the product roadmap is evolving and taking in all the feedback and is a living document that reflects that. And on the other side, making sure that our exec teams, right up to the CEO, are comfortable with the direction that we're taking forward. And especially in a place like growth, we're working with how users enter the platform, which is a very crucial part of our business, of any product, I would say. And so even tiny decisions that might seem minor has a huge impact on it, and has people being very passionate about what they believe should be in the product. So aligning all of the stakeholders across the company as well on the decisions that you're taking and having logical kind of reasoning towards it. So I work with the data team to do that. So my day-to-day really, every week I meet with my CEO and my exec team to make sure that we're aligned with what we're going forward. And on the other side, working with the dev teams to make sure they're very clear with what I'm asking them to build, whether it's a sign-up flow with a username and password being entered, whether it's a legal checkbox to say, I understand the terms and conditions, all of it being very clear with them as to what the build is and why it's coming through. So it's a cohesive kind of moving forward, and it's good for the company, the users, as well as the growth of the product itself. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's the users that I keep in mind every time I'm thinking about the product. I hope that answered both the questions. I kind of went into that. Okay, good.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. That was really awesome. And it was also really awesome to kind of hear like your perspective on like what your day-to-day looks like, because you specifically work for growth. So I'm sure it looks different for other areas as well. So thank you for kind of like sharing that part as well. Yeah. And I'd love to touch upon, and this is also another question that a lot of people are asking, but you did mention when you were kind of like walking through your journey, how important mentorship was to you and how important mentorship played a role when you were making your decision to leave Google and then get your MBA. So we do have like a few people wanting to know a little bit more about mentorship and how you kind of like go about finding a good mentor, and how you nurture and develop that relationship of mentorship.
Yeah, I found especially my early parts of my career, I found the mentoring to be a valuable source of feedback and input as I went through my career. I do find that I've kind of evolved the definition of mentorship for myself as I've come through the career. At some point it was a manager that I was working with that I was specifically requiring feedback on. But at this point, I look at it in I'd like to look at it in a very holistic way, where it's not just someone you're directly reporting to, but it's anyone who's had experience with something that you're interested in learning about. And for me, it was, coffee catch-ups or virtual catch-ups in the COVID world with other colleagues within the industry who have worked in maybe education or who have worked in this digital services, because there's parts of that I'm interested in and I'm working towards, working in right now. As well as keeping in touch with your mentors from the past. In my personal life, I'm really not great at keeping in touch with friends, I've been told, and I'm trying to get better at that. And so with mentorship, I think it follows the same rule. You're nurturing a relationship, and so keeping in touch with them and making sure that you have that relationship alive and going, and not just kind of reaching out when when you need something or when you're in trouble, I think is a huge part of that. For me, like I created a bond with my mentor that was almost, a two-way, because he'd been through an MBA as well. And so understanding what that meant, even during my experience, and kind of asking him questions about his own experience to help me, was a consistent one, and not just something where I was in Google and I kind of learned from and left. And I've learned that since then, he's also helped two other colleagues of mine go on to MBAs themselves. So he's creating a business out of it. And so it's amazing, right? And it's amazing to see that they have that. It is something that they take out of their lives to take that effort to help you. And so being thankful for that, and as well paying it forward. I'm starting to come to a point where I'm able to help, fellow colleagues who are coming in from India, for example, having that part of the journey similar to mine, or, looking to break into product, or looking to join Top Hat in other fields. And as much as I can, as much as possible, I try to honor that and try to help them. Especially when recently I saw someone moving into a contract role after their MBA, or looking to move into a contract role that was a product marketing role. And that was really exactly what I did when I completed my MBA. And that kind of resonated with me. Someone helped me with that contract role. And so just paying that forward, I was able to refer that person as well. And really, as much as it is in your control, trying to lift everyone around you up, and especially other women in tech. I think this is a great forum for advocating for that, because I think that is a very, very important piece.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point that you mentioned about, I think all your points are really amazing, but especially kind of towards the end about giving it back. I feel like when you then, and I personally have tried to do this more recently as well, when you then become a mentor, you kind of find out, you kind of understand mentorship a little bit better when you do become a mentor, and then you kind of understand what it is that you're looking for by being a mentor to somebody else. So that's really, really awesome that you mentioned that. And kind of segueing from what you mentioned about the MBA, I do see a few people also wondering, what was the advantage of getting an MBA, and how do you feel that helped you kind of transition from your marketing role to then being able to go into PM roles?
Mm-hmm. So the interesting part about the MBA was, when I was there, I found that my colleagues were there for primarily three reasons. One was they were looking to move companies. They were looking to try a new industry, for example, and so they were looking to move into something new from that perspective. The other was they were climbing the ladder within their own company, and some of them were still, 5 years ago, were still told that you need to get an MBA to be able to get to the next step. And so they were there, and others were looking for, new markets altogether, which I guess a part of it was where I felt in that bucket as well. But mine was a combination of reasons, as is everyone's. And so those were kind of mainly the three reasons that I saw people taking an MBA. But what I find during my experience was I picked up a lot about real decisions and real situations when you're in a management position, or when you're in a position that has a real impact in your company. The MBA that I did had a case study method that we follow, which is similar to Harvard's, where we take real case situations from real companies, and we learn through them and study through them. And a lot of times you would think that the ending of the case was the important piece, what decision they made and how that turned out. But really what it was all decisions, when it was made, are leaders are making them a lot of times with limited information and limited time, and trying to do the best that they can to make the right decision with the information they have. But what was important was they were leading their team with as much confidence and clarity as they could at that time, providing the confidence to the team. And so there's a lot of gray area involved in that. And I think for me, that was kind of one of the revelations of how do you deal with that gray area when you do come across it, and things are not always black and white. And the MBA course kind of throughout the year, it helped me practice that as well, taking those decisions and owning those decisions and the impact of those. You know, no one ever has all of the decisions right. And that's okay, because the way you react to the impact of it also is where the meat of the matter lies. You know, keeping your head around you and your wits around you for the entirety of that is what's important, and supporting your team is what's important. So for me, that was a lot of what I took from my MBA. And so when I was joining product after that, I looked at it as it wasn't a leadership role, but I looked at it from a role where I took ownership and leadership to drive that forward. And I think a huge part of that is just how your attitude towards the role is and what you make out of it.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. And I'd love to go into another question that I do see some people asking, and it kind of also goes really well with another question I was also wondering as well. But you do speak a lot about your experience at all of these types of companies, and you're now working at a smaller startup at Top Hat. So one question that I do see a lot is if you would ever consider going back to Google later on in your career. And then I'd love to follow that up with, you know, like, since you have had the experience to work at different companies, what do you usually look for when looking for another company? And does it usually align with like a certain industry or like certain values? Kind of like, what's your thought process there?
Mm-hmm. The ending of that question is actually super important, so make sure I answer that. But so, yeah, I mean, one thing that, Rosa, actually, you and I have been talking about before
Yeah.
is kind of, it looks on paper like it's a decision, and I was happy with it, and we move on with life. And in reality, it's always a decision that that for me, especially in the beginning, I was like, was that the right decision? Especially because I could see my colleagues within Google in the same time frame. And this is, you know, talking back to comparing and seeing what they're doing versus what I'm doing. And so I think slowly I started to realize that you could really go down that rabbit hole deep. Right. And so what that means is there could be so many what ifs in everyone's lives, not just in career, but I think this is a life thing where there could be so many what ifs. What if you married someone else? What if you didn't have a child at this point in time? And so a lot of it doesn't lead anywhere because you don't know what would have happened. And there's so many small factors that are involved in making that. But what I do know is I own the decision. And so I own the decision to move forward, and I'm very happy with what I've been able to make for myself, and I'm happy to continue down this path. Will I go and join Google again? Maybe, because this is not about hating Google or anything negative from that perspective. It was really my own journey that I wanted to take at a certain point in time, and so if all the stars align, maybe. And talking about the stars aligning, when I do look at a new company, yeah, there are certain aspects that I now know to look out for, given my past experiences. One of them is definitely the culture being right. And I know this sounds like such a cliche that a recruiter would say, but I've started to understand the real reason for it is you're spending most of your day, actually, if you're working on any normal tech job, you're spending most of your day with your colleagues, and you're making decisions and taking responsibility for those decisions together. And if you have colleagues who are supportive and are in there to make the most and having the same goal in mind as you, that would make the work a lot more interesting, a lot more successful, and a lot more fulfilling for you. And so there are some key questions, especially within product, that I ask to try to kind of figure it out. Like, I try to see if how the product team is divided and, what that structure looks like to understand what the support mechanism is. I try to understand the role that I'm stepping into. Is it a role that is newly created for a new part of the business, or is it something that has always been there? And I try to understand as well if, what it looks like for the company to reach a milestone. What are they looking for from the specific role, but from the product organization as a whole? Seeing where that fits in the whole company. Because I've been in different companies, and there is no right and wrong, but there are companies that have product as a department, but it is not the one that's leading the business from that angle. It's not a product-led business, which is fine. It could be a sales-led business where they have a bigger voice, and that might matter for some service organizations. And then there are a few, like Top Hat, which is definitely more of a product-led organization. Even this new growth initiative is a product-led initiative where we want to lead growth through product rather than, falling on having to have touch points with the user at every point in time to get them to a level where they're comfortable with our product, leaning on self-discovery of the product itself. So things like that, and understanding, as you understand a bit more about the role, know that it's a two-way communication. I can't stress this enough, and I really didn't feel like that when I started my career as well, because there is definitely a power dynamic there. But it is a two-way conversation where I've seen that a lot of good companies really appreciate when you also dig a bit deeper into understanding how, why, and where, surrounding the opportunities there, so that it gives you a bit of a reflection as to, is this something that you will thrive in? Because the last thing anyone wants is to make a force fit that doesn't work for either party. And so I think that's something that would be prudent to keep in mind.
Awesome. And that's actually, I really love your answer for that question. I almost selfishly asked that since personally, I'm a new grad, so it's really, or recent grad, so it's really, really helpful to kind of think or kind of hear your perspective on what you look for when you're looking for another company, and kind of what you're taking currently into consideration when you're looking for a company to move into. So that was really helpful. I'd love to ask you another question. This is a little bit more of a fun question. I love that somebody asked this, but somebody asked, what do you like to do for your hobbies to keep yourself balanced? And I think especially now that most of us are working from home, and personally, I'm definitely very grateful to be able to work from home. You definitely do still have to kind of find those things that keep you balanced. So what do you do on a day-to-day basis for that?
Yeah, I'm glad someone asked this, because I didn't get to share mine. I saw that you shared, and I thought that was such a great idea. So I definitely have a lot of time in my hands now. I am not known to be a good cook, but I've started baking, and I like baking because it has specific definitions for ingredients and products. And so I've started making brownies, and I also make some jam now because we've been having pancakes on weekends, and the maple syrup is too rich for me here. I know I'm in Canada, I'm supposed to love it. So I make my own jam, either blueberries or strawberry jam, and kind of work from there. As well as trying my hand on some Indian cooking, although there's a very high standard set by my mom for that. And so that's a tougher one for me to be satisfied with what I do. And my husband's a really good cook, so that's kind of something that's his domain that I probably will take up. But yeah, that's part of it. And what else? We've started gardening a bit. We've got some few plants, trying to keep them alive. We got an aloe vera as well, and so far she's doing good. We'll see.
Awesome. So I think those are most of the questions that everyone asked. We do have a few more minutes left. So we'd love to take some time to kind of just open up the floor if anybody just wants to unmute themselves and ask any particular questions for Vaishnavi that wasn't necessarily asked in the chat. So we kind of just wanted to open up the time for that.
Yeah, for sure.
And feel free to introduce yourselves as well. Oh, someone said I'm unable to unmute myself. Or is it just me? Their name is, I think Swati. So Swati tried to unmute themselves.
I wonder if
Yeah, no, I think now it's okay, but earlier it was not letting me unmute myself. So maybe
Okay,
somebody changed something.
no problem. Thank
Yeah,
you for
so
joining.
yeah, thanks. So actually, Vaishnavi, I have a question, and yeah, maybe yeah, I kind of figured out, but I really wanted your opinion on that. So I actually I'm working in the industry for more than 20 years and a lot of experience in agile product delivery and coaching. So as a part of my role as a coach in many organizations, the product management is not like a standard role. So I have to coach subject matter experts and give them that ability that they can function as a product owner or product manager. But however, like last couple of years, I developed like a lot of interest in that role versus just focusing on coaching and delivery. So do you have any suggestions in terms of how I should transition or how should I try looking at the product management opportunities?
and sorry, I missed what do you do now?
So right now, actually, I'm looking for my next assignment, but last 10 to 15 years, I was working on agile product delivery and agile coaching and transformation in the organization, like
Okay.
adoption and transformation. So it's just not like agile, but agile digital and delivery transformation for the companies.
Right, right.
Mhm.
I think that's a good kind of starting point because yeah, when you look at product management, there isn't like a simple, straightforward career path to it,
Mhm.
especially in the early days. But there are a few companies that are starting to open, you know, like associate product management opportunities for those kind of trying to step in. The one thing that's really great is product management is a mix of a lot of things, right? Because it's such a cross-functional role. It's a mix of, you know, dev, agile dev as well. It's a mix of marketing, sales, and a bit of coaching. Everything that kind of rolls into that position, I would say. And so, what I would see is look at your past experience, and you have so much of it. Look at it from the lens of what would be transferable to the new role that you're looking for
Mhm.
in product ownership, right? And try to highlight those aspects of it when you're kind of trying to move over. And I'd also say that it is kind of one of the best things to have that perspective mixed with what you think the business might need. Because the biggest two brains within product, from my experience, has been knowing what to build within the product from a business standpoint, but as well understanding dev speak. And from your experience, I'm going to assume that you understand dev speak and you understand
Yes.
kind of the logic that goes in it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I would say try to lean into and learn a bit more and pull your skills into like the business side of it and
Business
understand.
and marketing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, understanding why some decisions are taken and how that impacts, you know, the bottom line of the business, depending on the goals of the business, and how that can actually impact what you do. And so I think that connection will help you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much. So thank you for your question as well. It was really awesome to have you join in. And I just wanted to give a thank you to Vaishnavi for her presentation tonight. It was really awesome to hear more about your personal journey through Google, through your MBA, and now where you are at Top Hat. And I think it's really awesome to kind of hear about your decision-making process and your personal journey. And really, thank you so much for the really awesome advice that you gave as well.
Thank you, Rosa. Thanks for like being here as well. That's great.
Of course. So just to close out, thank you everybody for attending this Products by Women event tonight. You can definitely connect with the organization through LinkedIn and Instagram. You can sign up for the newsletter, and you can also join the Slack channel as well to connect with a bunch of other awesome women and just really grow your community and network. And make sure to attend our next event, which is on the 21st. How to run a remote design sprint. That'll be super fun and really interesting. So thank you everyone for attending today's event, and it was really nice to have everyone here. Thank you guys.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah. And make sure to connect with Vaishnavi on LinkedIn if you have any other questions. I believe the link is in the chat. So make sure that you connect with her as well. Thank you, everyone.
Super.